welcome.
Hello. Thanks for coming to this Masterclass where me, some guy, will interview the two masters, Colin and Sarah Northway, for the next hour. I think maybe give us a chance to get this started, but after maybe like 10, 15 minutes, feel free to interrupt us with questions or hold them to the end. We'll figure it out. Do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah Northway.
And I'm Colin Northway.
And together we are
Northway
Games. Yeah, really? I can't believe we just did that.
That's great.
Yeah, so we're a husband and wife team, and we also make games together.
That's great. So my name is Jonatan. I think I messed up sending my bio because a lot of those things are pretty old, but I used to organize Nordic Game Jam, I used to be part of GlitchNap, I used to be part of the House of Indie. Now I'm just some guy who makes video games. But Amaze asked us to do this, or asked me to do this, because they usually use journalists, but they thought it'd be interesting to have a developer interview other developers. So, you know, we had lunch together and we decided to just talk about like Unity memory management, controller mapping, and you know, if you have some really good deep technical questions, please, like building Flash for Android, we could talk about that.
Yeah, Windows 10 networking. I'm doing a lot of that this weekend.
No, but so I thought people would laugh at that joke, but that's not what we're going to be talking about. What we are going to talk about is basically what these people have been doing with their lives in the last maybe decade, where they started and where they've been, and also if we can get into topics like game design, that would be excellent. We'll try to follow those leads and see where we end up. Let's maybe start talking about you said you'd be interested in covering like how you got started, and I actually don't know about that. So
yeah, so Sarah and I have been this is year 10 for us actually being indie. So it started with the original Fantastic Contraption, which was a Flash game. And one of the things I want to talk about, because talking about origin stories is useful, because like there's a lot of different origin stories, and a lot of them are kind of like very scary. So I just wanted to kind of say that when I was doing it, the way it happened for me personally was working at a job I was making websites for lawyers, and it was like super boring. So I was playing a lot of like Flash games in my spare time, and then I got this game idea and I made it like feverishly, nights and weekends, and then released it and was lucky enough for it to go well. So I just kind of, I really like my own origin story because it doesn't involve any, it doesn't involve like pulling any like swords out of stones or like putting a bunch of debt on your credit card or anything. It's like, I think it's super important to know that you can do it while you have a day job, and like while your life is like not about suffering. It's like, it doesn't have to be some like weird, like glamorous mythical thing. You can like do it in your spare time, and then especially starting, and then go from there. So I just think it's like really important to say, no credit card debt, you know, you don't have to suffer. That's like,
Yeah, you can just make art in your spare time. You know, have a job that's not too creatively fulfilling, so you come home, you're still excited to make things. Make art in your spare time and not, you know, put your family in danger or whatever. And have success and like become indie. Of course, this was in 2009 that we did it, when there wasn't really such a thing as indie. It was just kind of getting started. So it was definitely a lot easier. And I think a lot of, like, one of the big lessons that we've learned from our success is that you want to be the first at things. Like, you don't want to just follow the crowd. You don't want to make a game that's like a clone of another game. You're just less likely to have success with that model. Whereas doing things like making indie games before they were really popular, putting your game on the web for free when like everyone was actually trying to have their games in stores on CDs and stuff. And these days we're doing VR, which is the same kind of idea. It's like nobody else is doing it, and a lot of our success just comes from the fact that we were one of the first people to have like a VR title. So
yeah, like if you think about why AAA, like why indies exist, like what niche we occupy, and why AAA doesn't make the games that we make, is because as indies we can take crazy risks, right? Like that's our advantage. So you like really have to maximize your like indie advantage and what AAAs can't do. So you have to do like crazy things that nobody else can do.
Yeah, risks in your art, not necessarily risks in your personal life or finances or sanity.
But then obviously you have to balance all that, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm interested, just to follow up on, you said Fantastic Contraption, Flash game. Were you working on that at the same time as well, or did you?
No, so I had a job in games. I was working for Three Rings Design in San Francisco, making like Puzzle Pirates and some other stuff. And I would come home every day just drained and exhausted because my job was so creative, and I put everything into that. And I'd come home and I just wanted to play games. I didn't have time to like make stuff, or I didn't have the mental energy to make stuff.
Right. And so what year was this? 2000?
2009, 2008?
or like 2007, 8.
And
Yeah, somewhere in there.
How did you make money off of Flash games in 2009?
So we were one of the first. So that's one of the reasons Contraption. So we really made Contraption, and then like for a kick, I was like, well, we'll do kind of like a shareware style thing, which is now more of like a free-to-play model, I guess.
It was literally just a PayPal button that was like, hey, give us $10 and you can have 20 more levels. And a ton of people clicked it. And it was entirely like a donation system kind of, or shareware, yeah.
But I think that's a really good, I think it's like also a really hopeful message that like the reason I made that original game that did well is because my job was just like totally boring and uninteresting. So like you can definitely use like a boring job as a springboard, like a creative springboard.
Yeah, because if you're spending all your design energy as a day job, it can be really difficult to, like we talked about this earlier, but like the most important thing if you do have a job that's not creatively fulfilling is to have the discipline to spend your creative energy in your spare time. But so it obviously worked out. There was Fantastic Contraption, and then what was the first game you worked on?
So the first professional indie game I worked on was Rebuild 1, which was also Flash game. Instead of using the like PayPal button model, I got sponsorship from, can't remember if it was I think it was like Two Towers Games or something like that. It was like a Russian game site. But yeah, they paid me enough that it was like worthwhile for me to develop more stuff. And so my first like 2 or 3 games had that model. And I don't know that model really like works so much anymore, but they would just kind of stick their logo on the front, and it was free, and it was everywhere on the internet. Back in the days of, all indie games almost were just like free accessible web Flash things, like Newgrounds and Congregate.
But that's another good lesson, right? Like in 2009, there was like the Flash ecosystem functioned in such a way that you could like get sponsorship money, and it's just the world is constantly changing. So 10 years ago, the way you made a living on video games is totally different from the way you make a living now. That was before Steam existed. So you just have to be. It's always hard to look to the past to look at how you should be making games and trying to make a living on games now. So you always want to try to be looking to the future and what's happening in the like more immediate past. You just have to constantly roll with what's going on and try to look ahead.
Yeah, right. Like advice that's older than a year in indie games is like maybe not even relevant anymore. So the best advice really we can give is like, look for advantages today, look for genres that are underserved, look for like, techniques in selling games that no one else is doing, and just try something weird.
Yeah, I mean, like 2 weeks ago, we would have said it's really valuable to kind of like, if you've heard of the series The Clark Tank by Ryan Clark, where he talks about analyzing Steam Spy data and trying to guess like, what genres are underserved and like what genres are players looking for. But now that advice is out of date because Steam Spy doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like Mike Rose did a GDC talk where he also compared numbers from like mid 2017 to early 2018, and they were completely different. So like, if any of this comes over as advice, take it with a big grain of salt, and if any of it comes over as like future speculation, the same amount of salt. So why are we here again? What are we talking about?
Yeah, like what can we really say?
Just advice. I love giving random advice.
Yeah.
Here's a good piece of random advice, right? So one of the things that's always going to be true is that you want to look for that Venn diagram of games you're interested in making, games you are physically capable of making, and games that people will pay you money for. And if you want to commercially make a go of it, then you want to be in the middle of that Venn diagram. Because there's a lot of games that fit all those things. Like hopefully you have a lot of ideas that you're interested in doing, and you want to find one that is both not going to take you 10 years to do, hopefully, unless you're a Spy Party, hooray, launched, and games that somebody is going to want to play. You know, if you're interested in making money, obviously, we both play and love a lot of games that are not trying to be commercial at all, and I think that's hugely valuable and a rich way to make games and use your creativity.
Let's switch topics to another one of your games. Incredipede came up earlier as well when we were warming up for this. Did you both work on Incredipede, or was that?
Yeah. So when we do games, we kind of pick one of us to be the main designer. You know, I mean, we have to live with each other outside being game developers as well. So we don't want to get into fights. Yeah. So one of the things is we decide that one of us will always have the final say on design. And Incredipede was one of Colin's designs. So I was a programmer on it and a co-designer as well. But it was like his baby and his vision. And he's super keen on physicsy games, and we're both really into like life, like artificial life stuff, and biology, and like the breadth of interesting stuff that is out there in the jungles. And we'll talk about the jungles in a bit too as well.
Just for a second, did any of you play Incredipede? Yeah. Maybe.
Thank you.
Clap. Yeah, video games.
Video games. Yeah, so that's kind of where that came from, and it was really Colin's child.
Yeah, that's kind of a good advice generally in partnerships. That if two people are like truly 50-50 on something, it can be kind of dangerous because there's no way to like resolve disputes. So it's really tempting if you start working on something to make it just like, all right, we'll just be like 50-50. It's like half yours and half mine. For us, having one of us be the owner of the project means that we don't, any personal disputes don't roll into game stuff and vice versa. And also the game doesn't get like watered down with kind of like two people's with compromises. And so I think it's actually really valuable that we don't kind of like compete on the games we work together. I think that's good general advice.
Also, both of us are programmers, both of us are designers. But neither of us is really an artist. Yeah. So we don't really have the full set of skills that you need to make a game, or the kind of games that we want to make. So every project we bring another artist in from somewhere else, and they really add to the team, add to the dynamic.
Yeah, tip 2, marry someone with complementary experience.
But before we get into the Incredipede artist, which I think is super interesting, I wanted to ask if the game would have looked any different if you had been the owner of it.
Yes, very, very different. I think I actually might have done some concept art or something early on for it. And I did a little art actually on the very original Fantastic Contraption too. That had my art on it. It was like very Flash Vector style. Yeah, which was pretty funny. Probably would have looked a lot like that, like clean Flash vectors, because that's the easiest thing for me as a non-game or a non-artist kind of person to tweak and change and make it just right.
Right.
Kind of mathematical style.
Right. So the artist on Incredipede was somebody who had never worked on video games before. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Incredipede artist's name is Thomas Shahan. And I think this is really valuable. So we tend to be in games like kind of insular. And so we all tend to play the same games, and we're all kind of inspired by the same things. And you can see, you can watch styles of games kind of rise in popularity and flow, and styles in art kind of rise and flow in popularity, all kind of together because so much of our we're drawing from the same things. So for Incredipede, I really wanted to get stylistically outside of what everybody was doing at games. So I started looking for artists that didn't work in games, so we're working in like a more traditional medium. And specifically, I wanted to set the game in kind of a kind of Victorian era woodblock style. So, but then I actually found Thomas by this total fluke. We're in the Philippines, and there was a cool looking spider on the deck. So I went and found the Wikipedia page for that spider, and there's a picture. There's this amazing spider picture. And I was like, oh my God, look how good that spider, I wonder who did that spider picture, if they have more cool spider pictures that I can look at. And so I found the credit and went to their website, and they had all these amazing spider pictures, and then it turns out they also did woodblock. They just totally randomly happened to do woodblocks And one of their woodblock looked like exactly like I wanted Incredipede to look. And so I literally just like dropped them an email and was like, do you want to like spend the next year making a video game? And just luckily he was just leaving school and said yes. And so there's like a cost of doing that, right? So Thomas didn't know anything about game production, so he didn't know, just producing assets was in the right formats. I had to teach him all of that. But the payoff is so huge because you end up with a style that is kind of outside what people are currently iterating on in games.
Yeah, because they don't have any traditional like digital tool production. They don't know Maya so they know wood carving. So that's really interesting translating that. Did you have any big problems translating his like experience into the digital?
Well, luckily, Thomas, that's the thing, is people are really adaptable, generally. So I think it's like, it feels like more of a risk, I think, than it is. I think people can learn, especially because, primarily the skills you're looking for in a teammate is not that kind of like, especially an artist, is not that kind of nitty-gritty, like, art pipeline stuff. Like, you can teach them that more easily than you can teach somebody who knows the pipeline stuff, like an interesting art style. So I think it's like, it's not as risky a bet as you might think it is.
Yeah, you had some specific anecdote earlier about how Thomas uses his tools.
So the problem is you can't download wood prints over the internet. So to make things digitally, Thomas actually had he would have like his like a Wacom surface, and then like obviously when you do a wood print, you like carve it away with a knife instead of like drawing with a pen. So he would like take his Wacom pen and like carve away. So like all the Incredipede art is done with like woodblock style carving on a Wacom tablet.
That's really good. I really like that. Let's talk about something else for a second. What have you been doing for the last couple of years? Are you still traveling, is what everybody asks?
Oh, yeah. So after the original Fantastic Contraption started making more money than Colin's job at the lawyer place did, we just like picked up everything and started traveling. We like sold basically everything that we owned, and like 5 solid years of nomadic lifestyle while making games. Like all 3 of my Rebuild games and like another like Incredipede and like another 4 games were all made while we were traveling.
So while you were in the Philippines, seeing a picture of a spider,
we were like living there for 3 months. Wow. Yeah,
and that doesn't cost a fortune to do. So Fantastic Contraption did well, but it didn't like set us up for life. We're not like, it didn't make us into millionaires. So we figured traveling, spending kind of like half the year in a city and half the year on a beach in the middle of nowhere in the tropics somewhere, cost about as much as living in San Francisco or Vancouver. Because when you're living away from a city, it's so much cheaper and it kind of covers your airfare. So if you're willing to sell everything you own and stop paying rent on an apartment, then like full-scale travel lifestyle is like within reach. Like if you make indie video games, you can do that like anywhere. So you should do it from like everywhere, right?
Yeah. The only thing that we really needed, right, was like power that worked during the day, which sometimes is all you get, but still that's enough, and an internet that works during the day. And the thing about the internet in like these weird remote, like in Panama, we were in Bocas del Toro, a little group of islands on the Caribbean side, and it like we were just way far away from anything. It was like 2 hours by boat to the nearest town, and but we still had internet. There's like 3G internet everywhere because people in areas like that, they never had landlines, so they just went straight to cell phones and put up a ton of towers as soon as cell phones came out, but they don't use the data so much, so like every one of those towers has like a strong 3G connection and you can just go around using that everywhere.
So we were living in Panama, we had solar power or generator when that failed, we had rainwater collection to get water. We had to drive a boat for an hour to get groceries, and Sarah launched a Kickstarter project. Did a whole Kickstarter from
the video for the Kickstarter, because it was for the 3rd rebuild. So my rebuild games were like small, medium, large. Like the first one was just like a prototype. The second one was like a, more mobile, like proper version. The third one was like the big Steam actual real 3-year game.
Any rebuild fans in the audience? Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
And,
So we see you.
Yeah. So for that one, I did a Kickstarter, and it's a post-apocalyptic, like city builder kind of narrative game. And for that one, I just described my life, but as if we were in the zombie apocalypse and we were living on this island on purpose to avoid the zombies, which made complete sense. Yeah. And that's kind of how it felt a lot when we traveled to weird remote areas, like survivalism.
How many different places do you ever do the math or?
Like a lot.
Like a lot?
Like 25,
Wow.
maybe. Yeah, we actually didn't travel as much as you'd think because we would stay in one place for.
Right. Yeah, because you have to get the work
the
done.
legal limit. Like 3 months is usually what, like 90 days is what a government will give you usually.
Yeah, that's like the one big tip is the one big tip for doing the traveling thing is just spend like a while in one place, like 1 to 3 months. Because if you're like, oh, I'm going to travel through Southeast Asia, go in a new city every 2 days, and I'm going to work, like, no, you're not. Every time you get to a new place, you get super excited about it, and you're like running around everywhere, and it's unavoidable. But if you spend 3 months in some city that maybe you've never been, when you first get there, you freak out and you get super excited and you like meet all these new friends. But then eventually you like get into kind of a routine and you can work your work into it. That's my first travel tip. My second travel tip is shave your armpits so you don't have to wash your shirts as much.
Wait, can you repeat that?
Shave your armpits so you don't have to wash your shirts as much.
That's wow. Yeah, okay.
Because it's
I'm not sure where to go. I'm not sure where to go from there.
Hard to get to a washing machine when you're traveling.
I'm not sure where to go from
you
there.
have
Any
to
other
learn
hygiene tips or hygiene in game design?
Yeah. Okay. I started using a safety razor, which is like it's less efficient, but it's like a nice meditation thing. So.
But you very selectively apply it.
Yeah, I guess I don't have to shave as much, so it's faster for me.
All right. I was wondering though, if you travel this much, like 20 plus different countries, doesn't it get tiring at some point? To isn't it? How do you keep motivated to always have to like start up this new? Where do I sit? Where can I work? Meeting people.
Actually that's the part that I really like, but maybe it's just the like survivalist in me, like the idea of like where are we going to buy groceries and like what's even available here and what are we going to make with that and like how do we get water sometimes. I love that. Like I was thriving on that. The real problem is when we started getting really good at it and it wasn't as exciting anymore. We showed up to a new place and we'd just be like, yeah, we'll figure it out. It's no big deal. Yeah, I realized that was part of the kind of rush and excitement of like, oh, what's the language here? Let's get a phrase book. Let's learn some stuff. And we just started getting so lazy. It's like, oh, Google Translate's got our backs. It's easy now. Yeah.
Did you ever have any other like times where the place you were really influenced the game, like the Incredibeat story? Like, was there any other?
Yeah, Incredibeat was really deeply influenced by Honduras. So I was working on the game mechanically for a while before that. But then in Honduras, this was kind of one of our 6 months when we were out in the middle of nowhere, and we were like on a reef next to a mangrove forest. And no, actually, mechanically it came from this. And there was just like, we would go snorkeling every day, and there's fish everywhere, and there's rays, and worms, and the reef is full of life. And then we'll go home, and there'll be like ants will be like invading our kitchen, while there's like hummingbirds flying around, and like snakes in the mangrove forest.
And it's like everything has its niche, and everything is like designed for that specific thing, like just designed by nature randomly or whatever. But it's figured out how to do its thing.
And there's like a huge variety of life, like all very different like styles, all like using different techniques to survive. And so it was like, oh shit, that's a good idea. And so that's where the idea for Incredibeat came from. And then reading about the history of the colonization of these places. There's always a lot of these woodblock prints from the Victorian era, so that inspired kind of the style there. The thing about travel is, so here's how I think creativity works. I think creativity works. You take a bunch of stuff and you jam it in your brain, and then somehow magically all that stuff like bumps into each other, and then it comes out as something good. And like you can't like force it. It's just kind of some weird magic. The only thing you can do is like match stuff in there. So travel is like an extremely good way to match stuff in there, right? So if you have kind of that routine of you're going to the job every day, you're walking down the same streets, you're seeing all the same things, you're hearing the same language spoken, you're seeing all the same like styles of even like advertising or art. If you take yourself up and you go to a different part of the world, all of those things change. And so you're stuffing your brain with like all of these new different things. And it's really valuable as a creative person.
Right.
I have a theory on creativity as well, and it is that you need to be bored. You have to like remove yourself from, these distractions that you have every day to really let your mind crunch. Some people go have a shower or they take a long walk or whatever. And so part of our thing, these times when we were in the jungle in the middle of nowhere and there was kind of just nothing to do, especially like the sun would set at 6 p.m. in the tropics, and then there's no bars, there's no like, our neighbors aren't young and they don't really understand us. So we would just like hang out, and somewhere in there's kind of this peace of mind that settles, and then you start to come up with your own ideas to just entertain yourself. And that's where like all my greatest creative things were like after long periods of boredom. 3 days when it was typhooning and we couldn't even go outside, and it's like, okay, well, now I have a great new idea for this thing.
And so how's life after travel?
Yeah, so now we're kind of settled down for the last 2 or 3 years. We ended up in Vancouver, Canada, which is a beautiful city with a really big games community, indie games community, which is really nice. So it's good. 5 years. I think 5 years of traveling was a good like phase of our life. And now we're a little more sedentary. Some of that is because we got super into VR just as it was happening, and with the current generation of VR stuff, it's all like you can technically travel with like a whole Vive and like a lighthouse setup and everything, but it's like not very fun to do that. So kind of going to Vancouver has worked out very well for us because being stationary works well with VR.
Do you want to talk a bit about your first VR game and how that came to be?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so we ended up going down to, so Valve's offices are just a couple hours south of Vancouver, and we had a friend who knew some people there. We went down to try a demo like at the end of 2015. We went and tried like the current version of the Vive, and we both just went nuts. Like we had a DK1, and it was pretty cool, but it wasn't, I guess it wasn't fast enough. We were trying to run it on a laptop especially. And when we actually got into the Vive, it was the first time I'd ever been completely fooled by VR. Like I felt like I was really there. There's a part where there's a ledge and I just couldn't step off of it. Like I thought it was real. We played Tilt Brush for the first time, which is just mind-blowing, like drawing art in VR. And we came out of it thinking like, okay, we have to make something for this and we have to make it for launch, which at that time was scheduled for 4 months later. So we had 4 months to make a game to launch with the Vive. And we wanted it to use like the big arm motions that Tilt Brush uses, and to be creative in the same kind of way, and not to move the camera at all, because that's an easy way to make people queasy in VR. We just wanted to avoid that whole thing. And we really wanted it to be like a defining, we wanted to explain how interactions are going to work in VR, right? Like we played with the DK1, we had like an Xbox controller, and it just felt kind of bad and sliding around and everything. But the Vive had these hand controllers, and you could just reach out. It just felt like you were reaching out and grabbing things. So we were like really wanted to help define like what those actions are going to feel like and how interfaces should look. So we went super deep on just like what's our own vision for how VR is going to be. And then combined it with, it was about the 10-year anniversary of the original Fantastic Contraption at that point. So we were like, let's bring Fantastic Contraption, not just to 3D, but to VR with grabbing and stretching and moving. So you're like building machines with your hands in your living room, and they're like these giant things. Colin actually, I think, came up with the idea in like a dream.
Oh, the original Fantastic yeah, it's like, that is a corny story. It was like literally, I like woke up when I was had the boring lawyer job. I like woke up in the morning. I was like, and then I scribbled on my note paper. I scribbled armadillo run, but you are the basketball. So Armadillo Run is this like old physics game. Where actually it's
Armadillo Run is really
that looks like a basketball.
But it's really kind of the Incredible Machine too. It's just like a cool physicsy, like this is the same genre of games, which is why the name is like an ode to the Incredible Machine.
Yeah.
Which we love from the 90s.
But I still have that like piece of paper that has like the idea scrawled on it.
Yeah,
and then
it's like the invert where you make the cool ball.
And then for some, actually, the original contraption, and I've never had this experience since, but that was like, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and the guy gets obsessed with a mesa, and he ends up like building the mashed potato mountain, and he like interrupts dinner in his entire life, and he just makes like mashed potato mountains of the mesa. That was like what that game felt like to me. It's like it totally took over the original contraption only took me like 4 months to write, and that was all like nights and weekends, and I just like it was obsessive. I couldn't stop myself from doing it like every free moment. It was like I was just like sneaking like alt tabbing at work and like writing code on this thing when I could get away with it, and it was so if you have that experience, that's awesome, but I have never had that sense, so it's not like a requirement.
The amount of tunnel vision never occurred again.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from.
And I was just beside you on the couch, like playing the original Spelunky the whole time. Just like, I got no part in this.
Which, by the way, if some people might not know this, but there's a blue character in Spelunky. It is him. It's not just a coincidence.
Yeah, we're friends with Derek Yu, and so we came back from San Francisco at some point, and I was a huge fan of the original Spelunky. And then at some point, Derek is like, "Oh shit, Colin, I want to show you this thing." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's funny. That looks kind of like me." And he's like, "No, that is you. You're in Spelunky now." Yeah. I think I'm slightly more famous for my own games than I am for being in Spelunky.
I'm not so sure.
It's like 50-50.
Did you ever talk to anybody who worked on the Incredible Machine series?
Yeah. Nuts, I forget his name. But yeah, I talked to the lead designer once. I met him at like my second GDC I ever went to. And it was just really nice to like shake his hand and buy him a beer, and he had never heard of Contraption, but that's fine.
Yeah, Fantastic Contraption for me was like the first time I really saw the potential of like completely reinterpreting like input mechanics, because you have the sort of, you can create a button in VR by like pressing your VR hand on a virtual button. But like you can do so much more, like the hat you put on, and the fact that like the levels are like miniature versions of itself, and I want to throw this into fire because I'm done with it. Like,
did you find the backpacks? There's like all these shortcuts over your
back. That sort of stuff that's in Space Pirate Trainer as well. And that's actually where I wanted to go. Is like, did you find that any of the stuff you feel like you have ownership over inventing has now become like VR canon? Like everybody's doing that now?
Yeah. So I could talk for VR for a long time. I don't know if everybody wants to hear me talk about VR for like the next 4 hours.
We got like 25 minutes.
But I think one of the so I'm deeply into VR, and I'm going to be like stuck on VR as far as I can tell for the rest of my life.
I'll cut you off, don't worry.
Okay. But one of the things that's very important to me in VR is getting away from like all of those kind of like crutchy like buttons and all the things we do because it's convenient, or all the things we do in a flat screen because that's how it works with a mouse. I really think we should start working with interaction design, like industrial designers, like people who design like coffee machines, because they are thinking about things in like a physical, like grabbing handles and moving things, and that's how. If you think about how humans evolved, we've spent a lot more time with like axes and sticks and spears and nets than we have with buttons and switches. So if we can go back to designing stuff from that like kind of caveman perspective, I think it just lights up the brain a lot more. It can be like, sometimes it's easier to make it intuitive, sometimes it's harder to make it intuitive, but I think it's always going to be more rewarding. And the challenge is we just have to get good at doing that, because we haven't really been doing that kind of design before.
Yeah.
So I also really love VR for like the same reasons, and I think it's just a brand new media, and we should all like have a lot of respect for it for that reason. But also, when I make games, I make them for like myself as a teenager, basically. Like I imagine I'm out there. I make them for an audience. Like I really I enjoy making the games, but what I enjoy more is hearing from other people who've played them and love them, and I just want to like spread that goodness. And there's kind of a small audience for VR right now, like dedicated, wonderful audience, but I can reach a lot more people right now by making a flat screen game, as I call them, which is kind of derogatory, but I'm making one right now. So Colin right now is still working in VR, and I'm helping as a programmer, but also I'm working on my own thing, which I hope will be, that a lot of people will get to play. It's another reason that some of my stuff is more commercial maybe than, I'd like it to be. Like I really do think about, just getting a lot of people into it comfortably. That's why I do mobile, and it's why I did 2 sequels, because like people really wanted more Rebuild. And it made people very happy for me to make it. And that's like one of the big reasons that I make games. So that's like one way that we do differ.
Yeah, we should probably talk about like the VR marketability, like VR money thing. So right now, it's a pretty bad idea to make like an indie VR game if you're trying to use it to pay rent, unfortunately.
You took it all. You took all the money.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The first
Northways
round
of all the VR money.
The original, Contraption VR did very well, and there's a list of VR games that did very well. But,
which is not very long, right?
Yeah, it's not very long, and most of those games were during launch, which were very special kind of times. This is also how it's valuable to be looking at the future and what's going to be happening, because you can when the opportunities strike, you want to be there. You want to be ready for it. And so if I was going to give you advice, if you want to work in VR or you're already working in VR, and I was going to give you some advice, it would be to try to find a way to do it that you don't like on the side, or you're doing contract work or something, because like I firmly believe that the VR thing is going to happen, that when headsets get cheaper, and it's like maybe the 6DoF standalone stuff even coming next year is going to do it, maybe. I still think we're a couple years away, but it's so mind-blowing and good that the VR moment's going to happen, and I think there's a lot of value in being ready for it when it does happen. But it's super hard to make a living at it right now. Although it is possible, like Onward, and there's some games that have done it.
Right.
Yeah, but in terms of making amazing art, like it's astounding right now. It's a super cool medium. If you can, afford the headset, I think it's a really, really interesting thing to be doing. It's just like, don't expect to be able to pay rent based on that art. And the games and everything that you want to make. If you do want to like pay the rent with VR games, just get funding up front. There's still a lot of money out there from platform holders and other people.
See Colin disagreeing with that a little bit.
It's not trivial, but like there is still a lot of money. Also government grants. I mean, we're in Europe. There's tons of government grants, and VR is something that most governments are still super excited about because it's new. Every country wants to be like known as progressive, new tech kind of facing. So don't try to go it alone. Don't assume you can just release a thing out of nowhere in VR. That's pretty unlikely to be a hit.
But there's also so few people working in VR right now that it's very hard to hire for VR. So if you set up and have those skills for when VR goes off, then you will have a huge advantage over everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. So, Fantastic Contraption VR, and then now you have a new VR project which is here in the show, which is called The More. You refer to it as The More, but what does it stand for?
The Museum of Other Realities.
Right.
And it's literally like a museum. It is art that was designed many times in VR, and it was all designed specifically to be viewed in VR. And it's very, very cool, and y'all should go check it out if you haven't seen it yet in the expo hall here.
Yeah, so I mean, I say don't work in VR right now if you want to make a living, but I mean, I'm doing this, and I kind of just can't help myself. I think that the More is kind of a good long-term plan, that if we can keep it going we hope to do a commercial release in a year, and then hope to maybe be able to support a very small team, and then in 2 or 3 years be able to grow that project in scope. I think that doesn't make sense for a lot of game projects, because a lot of game projects are like you make it and then you release it, and it's hard to get attention for it, a year or 2 years after it's released, or even a month after it's released. So if you have a project that works like that and you can afford to kind of string it along for a while, then I think that's a decent way to do VR right now.
The More is definitely like a personal just project that Colin really wanted to do, especially the idea of supporting all these artists. Like there's a lot of people working in this new medium that have very little exposure. They're just kind of tweeting their cool things. But we're kind of hoping to, by putting them all together, that they'll get seen by more people, and we might be able to do more events like this. Maybe we'll do shows in physical galleries, and just get them out there, get them more exposure, and hopefully get them paid as well for their work, even though they're all just doing it for the love. Like most people in VR should be doing it for the love. It's a really exciting medium. There's a lot to love.
What are some of the artists that you're working with in the More?
We're showing about 20 people in the More right now. 2 of them there's one right, Miriam Zakarian is right there, and Vlad Storm might be here or maybe not. And then there's artists from all over the world. We have Australia's pretty well represented for some reason, the United States, a lot of Europe,
Right.
Not many Canadians, I guess. But really from all over, and it's a nice community. Just it's still small and passionate, and it's people who have really engaged with the medium over the last year or two. And we kind of find each other by Twitter or being introduced. One person will introduce another, and the point of the More right now is to try to give people a way to be inspired. To see each other's work and be inspired by it and draw ideas from each other's work, so that we kind of all grow as a community instead of individual little, plants trying to find our own way in the world.
So let's talk a bit about why you want to do this conceptual arts or contemporary arts. Doing it in VR makes sense with your background, but what draws you from being a game developer designer into the more sort of gallery type art? I know you just talked about it in another panel, but for those of us who weren't there, what's the pull for you to go more into sort of maybe abstract art or conceptual art rather than stay within games?
Well, I think for me, it's all about. I think it's just a good tip in general is to follow your nose, know what's good, and then follow it and find out how to make it, bring it to an audience, and make it a real thing. So for me, how to get involved in it. And so for me, after shipping Contraption, there was all these just strange, Kabibo started releasing these strange VR art things, and I started getting more excited about those than I was about games. So I just, So they're super good, but they're kind of bite-sized, and so they're really hard to get to try. The most you'll ever see one is you'll be on Twitter and you'll see a picture or a GIF or a little video of something, and you're like, whoa, that looks really cool. But if I wanted to play it, I would have to go find their website and download it and then unzip it and put it on my headset and then start it up, and I would probably only spend 20 minutes with it. So it's not really worth my effort to go do it. So I was like, well, one way you could fix that is if you started taking this stuff into one place. And it's actually, I was really inspired by kind of the Flash scene that used to be. So it's a huge loss that we don't have the Flash scene anymore, because it used to be, as a game designer, you would just, where am I going to get some raw material? I just want to try weird things, see what's going on in the world, what people are doing. You just click on something, get a bite-sized, strange idea, and then get bored of that and click on something else. So we've pretty much lost that now, which is a huge detriment to us as game designers. So I'm kind of hoping that the museum will act in that way for VR stuff. That'll be a way for people to get in and try stuff that is interesting and to try ideas that people are doing without having all of the overhead, just the effort overhead of having to download stuff.
Cool. I think I roughly covered everything that I wanted to talk about. I have the price of avocados in South Africa, if you want to quickly make a note on that?
Yeah,
before-
we're talking about how avocados are really expensive here, and if you just go to South Africa, you can get an avocado for 20 cents. They have 20-cent avocados in South Africa. It's pretty good reason to move to South Africa.
That's crazy. That's our main conclusion. No, I wanted to say we have about 10, 15 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, there's a microphone right there. Feel free to line up there, go ask a question whenever you're ready. Otherwise, we can keep talking. There's one topic we haven't covered, which is school, but I think we're about to get interrupted, which is good. Please go ahead.
This is working? Yeah. All right. I was wondering, I'm looking for places to go to escape the winter and maybe work remotely or find work there for 3 to 6 months. Do you have any recommendations where to go or how to go about it?
I mean, Thailand's kind of a cliche for a reason. It's the food is amazing. It's safe. The infrastructure is pretty good. As a first destination, that's a pretty good one.
Costa Rica is kind of the same way. It's so many people go there that it's got everything you're going to need. And also the people are really friendly and wonderful. And Costa Rica does actually have some work as well. At Thailand as well, you can probably find work there. Non-creative work, working in a bar, working wherever, so that you can then focus all your energy on awesome games.
And South Africa is a pretty interesting place. It's pretty cheap to live there, and they've got a small but pretty dedicated game scene. One of the advantages of going to a major city is that if you're in indie games, you have friends in every major city in the world. And there's always game meetups, and people are eager to meet people from elsewhere and talk about ideas. So it's as indie developers, we have this huge world network that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, especially in my experience as well, the people who live in remote locations are just exceedingly happy that people are coming to them, because people in Australia or South Africa, they are so used to having to travel to have their sort of network reinforced, their work validated. Then having somebody visit can be really great. So those people are often really, really welcoming. I have the opposite problem of I live in Reykjavik, Iceland, which also, as a winter destination, I'm just getting really depressed hearing you talk about these other places. But people are visiting all the time to the point where we have a bit of a, please, you can visit, I'll hang out with you, but we also like to sit in our couch sometimes so that there's not an indie developer sleeping on it. But you're still, they're welcome. It's just people are literally flying, east to west layovers in Reykjavik all the time.
Yeah, Buenos Aires in Argentina is also just an amazing city, and very welcoming.
Yeah, cool. Is there any more questions right now? Well, thanks for that.
Thanks, it was super interesting. I just wanted to say that if you go to a market in Kreuzberg, you can also get full crate of avocados for €1. What? It's my Batufa-Markt.
We should tell Anya Combs from Kickstarter. She has an avocado tattoo and is a big fan. Should go on a field trip. There's one more thing I would like to talk to you about. We had some conversation about going to school for game design. I don't know if any of you are students or people who want to be students, but what's your experience with? Do any of you have degrees in games?
So we both have, so we're old, and when we went to school, there was no degrees in games. But so we both have computer science, programming degrees, which is what I suggest if you want to get into games, is just learn to code. Because A, it's going to make it so much easier to actually implement your ideas. And B, even if the game thing doesn't work out, or you want to get a job that's outside of the indie sphere, it's so much easier to if you're a programmer than if you're a designer or have something that's way more game specific kind of skills. But it's not as fun as designing games, for sure.
Game design to school just seems you're really pigeonholing yourself. You better really you better be able to get some kind of job that's interesting. I feel I don't know, but I feel most game design students are going to end up in kind of a mobile field designing economy stuff, and that is probably not what your dream is. And so if you did a degree in art or in programming, then you are set up for a very broad range of possible backup plans.
Right. Yeah.
Although if your plan is to just be indie, I'm not sure it really matters if you're very dead set on it, I'm not sure it really matters what you study, so long as you come out of school with the contacts that you're going to need, like knowing people in the community, knowing people that you can actually work with and maybe form a company with, and also like a portfolio of stuff, like experience having actually made games. So long as that's what you're doing in your university degree, like you're good.
I think the best way to learn game design, or really anything, is just to do it. I mean, I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I also think there's a bit of a rule of 10, that like the 10th game you make will be good. So you have to make like...
I made a lot of games before my first one that I actually sold.
Yeah, there's also that kind of like that dangerous mentality when you like kind of start making games for real, is like, oh, I'm gonna make my like dream project. It's gonna be like a giant thing, and it's gonna make me like millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, there's some people that, I mean, it does have, everything happens, right? That's the caveat, is like you can't say anything is a bad idea because somebody has successfully done it. But it's much better to start smaller, and especially you should be releasing things, and you should be releasing them like on Steam or at least itch, because when you do finally hit that thing that's like amazing and everybody goes crazy for, it's super valuable just to have gone through the process of uploading it to Steam, just putting like the image, putting all the banner images up, knowing how that whole process works. It's just worth going through, even if you're not going to get a ton of downloads, and it's like, that's fine. Most games don't get a ton of downloads. Most games I've made don't get a ton of downloads. But just going through the experience is super valuable, because then when the time comes to like really like nail the launch, you've already gone through a bunch of that stuff before. Like the same goes for contacting press and trying to get press. Like even if you don't successfully get a lot of press for this game, you'll have like gone through the motions, and you'll have like an idea of how it all works. So I think it's worth releasing stuff, and it's worth going through the whole rigmarole of trying to get attention and releasing on Steam and itch and your processes. And then don't get discouraged if it doesn't go well, because obviously most of the time for everybody it doesn't go well, but you'll be prepared when it does go well, when everything goes right.
Right. So don't go to school, just release games on Steam.
Yeah.
Quote Colin Northway.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, in my experience as well, the school is a really great place to meet like-minded people more than anything else. Like, the quality of the education program hinges so much on the quality of the teachers, which is, you have something you don't have any control over. So, yeah, doing stuff, I guess. I just agreeing. I was going to try to disagree with you more, but... Yeah,
I guess the trick is sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself to work on that stuff, especially if it's on the side. But it's not going to get easier to motivate yourself after you've released a successful game. Like, if you're the kind of person who can sit down and like motivate yourself and finish something, then that'll always be valuable. But you have to be able to do that.
Cool. Yeah, I think we have another question. We have a little bit of time left.
It's all right. It's all right. One question was that. Did you happen to have any legality issue stuff releasing from all the different countries? Maybe
no
comment. Because like some countries have different taxes and stuff. Did something like that happen?
I'd assume the country you're incorporated in is Canada, and like you don't really tell the Canadian government that the majority of the work wasn't done on Canadian soil.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we just travel as tourists, and then we pay taxes in Canada, like we live in Canada full time. And
we think of ourselves as like travel writers, except instead of writing about our travels, we make games out there. And we were, even when we were for the 5 nomadic years, we still spent at least 2 months, usually like 3 or 4, in Canada every year. So
tell the border guards you're on vacation.
Yeah, that's the rule about working in other countries. You're on vacation, you're not going to work. You just finished your last game, and now you're...
And I hope no border guard ever plays this video back to me at a border.
Yeah, you don't want to end up in a situation like Adrian, who told the U.S. immigration that he was going to record a video series with an American company or something, and then was just like rejected entry because he only had a leisure travel visa or something. But yeah, no, it's a very valid question, but I've traveled around a bit as well, and as long as the country you're incorporated in, and you're doing all of that well, which was for me Denmark, even though I was living in Belgium and Iceland, the most of it works out. Just, don't be too loud about it. I'm guessing you didn't like register for like your legal domicile to like Thailand and Honduras at any point.
No.
I mean, you could probably reduce your tax burden or something in your home country if you were like super lawyerly about it. But
it's just not worth the effort. It's just so much work to get a work visa. Even in countries that really, really want you there, and they want your money, and they want whatever. It's just the bureaucracy isn't really built for it, and yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah, you want to just look like countries are most worried you're just going to go and then steal their like cafe jobs. So just like we'll try to look as much like you're not going to do that as possible somehow.
So to maybe wrap this up on a high note, since the world's about to end and you've been to all these places, zombie apocalypse, etc., where would you recommend all of us to move if we want to extend our lifetime with a couple months?
Well,
Namibia?
What did you say?
No, Colin suggested Namibia. There are no
Namibia.
people in Namibia. It's like a real empty place. But I don't know about like scavenging for food or anything. It's kind of all a desert.
Zebras.
Oh yeah, that's true. We'll just go like hunt rhinos and all the wonderful endangered species.
Just in terms of just straight vacation, Namibia is the most amazing place we have ever been.
Yeah, I think so. I think we both agree on that.
Let's all just move to Namibia and like ride lions around.
Yeah.
So like I'm wondering, I'm imagining this now. Like it's already really hard in the Western countries like Europe and North America to like get people to care about your video games. Have you made any like meaningful connections to local, non-Western people who maybe don't even have access to technology as much? And like, did you ever try to talk to them or build bridges with like did you have to do a lot of like scaffolding of like we're game developers,
Yeah,
video games
they
and
often
VR.
like don't get us. Mostly they think that like game developers must be working on FIFA. They're just like, which game did you make? FIFA 2016 or 2017?
Yeah, everybody knows FIFA.
Everyone knows FIFA.
You'll be in like a country with, like a poor country without a lot of infrastructure, and these are cool. It'll be just like a simple building and then just a big screen TV with like 4 people playing FIFA on it. It's just like FIFA arcades and like really remote.
But then you bring a laptop in with like the prototypes for stuff you're working on, and you show it to them, and they just lose their mind. They're just like, oh my god! And you made this? Like you're just working on this like on this laptop? Yeah, and it's eye-opening for a lot of people, and they suddenly start going like, whoa, how hard is it to make a game? And you're like, it's so easy. Unity, just go get it. It's free.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm done, and if anybody has any more questions, we have 1 minute. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Real quick. All right, last question. We got this. You got 55 seconds.
Okay, hi. What do you think about augmented reality or mixed reality as a game medium?
Okay, so
40 seconds, go.
Okay, so it's just going to take longer. The AR tech is like, I don't think it's that compelling yet, and it'll be super compelling eventually, like 10 years or something. I think it's a long time.
You got 30 more seconds.
But I actually think if you're really interested in AR, then doing VR work right now totally prepares you for doing AR, because like all the problems that we're solving, like we do parties in the Moor, and we have like names on top of heads, and you hit a button to bring up a bio, and you can like copy their Twitter address in your Clipper buffer, and that's like, those are all obvious AR dream stuff, right? So like all the kind of like obvious AR stuff you want to do, you can do it in VR right now and then be prepared when AR happens.
Perfect. Good. Wow. Impressed by the timing. Thank you so much, Colin and Sarah Northway, and thank you so much for coming out.